Demanding answers after it emerged that the British government has charged women sent abroad for forced marriages for their own rescue. The Times newspaper says the Foreign Office told the women that they'd have to pay for their flight home as well as food and shelter. Those unable to pay were made to sign a loan agreement with penalties for late repayment. The newspaper cited the case of 4 women, each charged almost $1,000 to be flown back from Somalia, where they'd been detained at a religious correctional school and subjected to brutal treatment. For those who chose to borrow the money, a 10% surcharge was added if it wasn't repaid within 6 months. A spokesman for the Foreign Office said the money provided was an emergency loan, adding, as they are from public funds, we have an obligation to recover the money in due course. Well, let's speak now to Shaista Gohir, a Muslim women's rights activist in Britain and executive director of Muslim Women's Network. Madam, thank you so much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. And your own network has done a lot of work on this issue, and you were highlighting it to the government years ago, as far as I can see. Now, talk us through exactly what the scale is of this. How many women a year, roughly, are we talking about? What kind of sums are we talking about?
Yes, we started campaigning on this 2 years ago, so we were disappointed that the Times didn't actually acknowledge our campaign this morning. In 2016, we contacted the government, the Foreign Office, and also the Foreign Secretary at the time was Boris Johnson, and we raised this issue and we said that why are forced marriage victims being charged repatriation fees? Because we're not talking huge numbers. It could be several, it could be dozens every year. So you're talking every year, it could be several thousand, not more than tens of thousands of pounds that it costs the government. So we're not talking hundreds of thousands of pounds here. So we were quite appalled when the government said, well, it's due to budgets and we can't afford it. In the end, after meeting government officials in February 2017, we managed to get a concession and they partially changed the policy. So they said we will no longer be charging 16 and 17-year-olds for repatriation fees. We welcome that, of course, but we felt that they needed to go further and include all forced marriage victims, because sometimes they're going to be faced with a stark choice. They walk into an embassy, they ask for help. It's either going back out to the forced marriage or signing a loan agreement that they might not be able to pay back, getting on the plane to safety. And we had such case. We had a 17-year-old was made to sign a loan agreement. She was rescued from Pakistan. When she got to the other end, her passport was confiscated. She started to get letters demanding payment. She contacted our Muslim Women's Network helpline. We then contacted the government and we said, this is not on. Unfortunately, even though they did change the policy for 16 and 17-year-olds, our client was still made to pay more than £800, which she didn't have. So we managed to fundraise. And you know where that money came from? From the public. The public were outraged when it was highlighted 2 years ago, and they actually sent us in donations, and we paid off the loan, or they paid off the loan. So if the government are saying that the public would be outraged, they wouldn't be outraged. They're outraged at the government, actually.
Well, yeah, it seems it. And I found very interesting what Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary's response to this was. Because you say you got a concession from Boris Johnson, who of course was Foreign Secretary then. Jeremy Hunt today said he wants to get to the, quote, bottom of the issue, that he usually leaves it to the discretion of whichever embassy is involved, depending on the country, but that he would always believe that the issue should be treated with respect and humanity. I mean, based on that statement, do you think that the Foreign Office is now thinking perhaps of changing the way this is handled? And why do you think it is handled in this way if, as we've been mentioning, the money itself isn't really an issue? Last year it was 82 victims repatriated, most of them flights of about £700, £800.
Yeah, I think it has to be. I don't think it's up to the different embassies. This is a Foreign Office policy, so it's a blanket policy across all embassies, because that money actually comes from the Foreign Office. So if they changed it, it would have to be across the world. So I don't accept what they're saying, that they don't have enough money, because when the Foreign Office wants to fund wars, for example, they find the money to do that. I hope now that, because there's obviously another push now, it's been publicised yet again 2 years later, that, and there's MPs now making comments across social media. I hope they will relook at this issue and take it more seriously. The other thing I want to point out is that Sajid Javid, who's the Home Secretary, he's now just put out a forced marriage consultation. Organisations can respond until the end of January. He's asking the question, what more needs to be done by the government to increase reporting? Now, I think the Home Office and the Foreign Office need to be talking to each other, because the Foreign Office's policy is probably preventing reporting or making reporting more difficult.
Shaista Gohir, Executive Director of the Muslim Women's Network. Madam, thank you for sharing your expertise with us on this. Thank you.
Thank you.